All right, let's get right into this explainer. Today, we're dissecting the anatomy of a system. We're going to break down the exact structural and psychological machinery that takes totally healthy collective action and mutates it into a divisive, closed-loop system. By pulling from sociology, psychology, and theology, we're going to uncover exactly how these ideological traps are built. Here's a quick roadmap of what we'll be covering today. 1. Healthy action versus cults. 2. Defining a cult structure. 3. The mechanics of control. 4. Why it is hard to leave. 5. The intellectual antidote. And 6. The way forward.
Let's start with Section 1, Healthy Action versus Cults.
So, to understand how a group goes bad, we really need a baseline for what normal looks like. Think about a healthy group like departments in a well-run corporation. They're fueled by healthy competition, cooperation, and this open, free flow of ideas. It's a permeable, breathing system. But a divisive cult? That's a rigid, closed loop. It literally weaponizes dogmatism, acting as this intolerant machine that manufactures division instead of true unity.
Moving on to Section 2, Defining a Cult Structure. You might be wondering, how do we actually spot this mutation happening? Well, these closed systems definitely don't just happen by accident, they are completely engineered. Expert sociological research tells us this architecture relies on 3 specific pillars. First, you've got the centralization of absolute, unquestionable authority. Second, there's a strict top-down power structure that operates completely outside of normal justice. And third, they deploy a highly coordinated program of persuasion, which is what we commonly call thought reform.
That brings us to Section 3, the mechanics of control.
For this authoritarian machine to survive, it has to build a completely closed logic loop. Basically, if you criticize the group, it automatically means you are defective, never the organization. There is absolutely zero accountability at the top. Any factual contradictions are just buried, and dissenting variables, meaning anyone asking tough questions, are instantly filtered out to keep everyone perfectly compliant.
And that ties perfectly into this clinical concept called milieu control. They usually frame this as preserving unity, but it's actually an environmental quarantine. They'll enforce a strict no gossip or no nattering rule to systematically suppress perfectly normal human doubts. By forcing members to police each other's conversations, the system isolates people and creates this total dependence on the top leadership for all information.
Now, thought reform isn't some sudden, dramatic brainwashing event like you see in the movies. It's highly coordinated and incredibly gradual. It's honestly a lot like slowly gaining weight without noticing. You get a subtle twist in behavior here, a little tweak in your daily vocabulary there, and eventually, the environment has systematically manufactured a totally new mental outlook for you.
A massive catalyst in this whole conditioning process is love bombing. This is where peer pressure gets weaponized. The environment is set up so a new recruit is literally never left alone to process their own thoughts. You're just bombarded by these intense displays of joy and all this exclusive group jargon. Human beings naturally want to connect, right? So to survive socially in this new environment, you are forced to conform and imitate them just to feel accepted.
Section 4. Why it is hard to leave.
At this point, you're probably sitting there thinking, okay, if it's so restrictive, why not just get up and walk out? It's a completely natural question. But the reality is, the locks on the doors aren't physical. They are psychological, and they are terrifyingly effective.
These psychological bonds are forged through what experts call the 5 Ds. Look at how these compound to build an invisible cage around a person. Deception hides the true nature of the group when you first join. Then, debilitation sets in. You're just exhausted from the intense, constant commitment. Dependency kicks in because you're cut off from the outside world. Dread is manufactured by making you believe leaving means total destruction. And finally, desensitization makes you gradually ignore massive moral compromises.
Section 5, the intellectual antidote.
So how do we actually counteract all these manipulative mechanics? We have to look at structural solutions. As outlined in our source text, foundational theology gives us a brilliant intellectual antidote. Islam, for example, is presented as a fundamentally rational ideology built on the principle of sufficient reason. While those closed systems rely heavily on emotional manipulation, a healthy ideological framework actually demands a solid intellectual basis and the active use of logic.
And this brings us to a structural principle that totally dismantles that our way or the highway mentality. There is no compulsion in religion. True belief, by its very mechanical nature, just cannot be forced.
Even historically, when the physical power existed to force alignment, this structural principle explicitly forbade it. And get this, questioning the system when things feel off isn't a crime. It's a built-in theological imperative. It's the exact opposite of a cult's no-gossip rule. The Prophet Muhammad explicitly stated, "The cure for ignorance is asking questions." Engaging your intellect, assessing the rules, and scrutinizing authority are features of a healthy system, not bugs. Doubts are literally the catalyst for operational transparency.
Finally, Section 6, the way forward.
So how do we engineer a healthier future? Structurally, the goal is to blur the rigid lines around these isolated groups and integrate them back into the broader community. The source text really emphasizes the ummatic bond, this holistic collective connection. To get there, we have to ditch the superficial slogans and blind group loyalty. We have to replace them with serious intellectual work, healthy competition, and genuine enlightened cooperation.
Understanding the anatomy of these systems is absolutely the first step in cultivating resilient, thriving networks. So I'm going to leave you to really reflect on this crucial metric today. Look closely at the systems and organizations operating in your life right now. Are they encouraging you to ask questions and engage your intellect, or are they busy constructing cages of control? Thanks so much for tuning into this explainer.